Good evening. It is good to be back with you. And brethren, friends, thank you so much for the encouragement. What I mean by that is there is a bit of a proverb among preachers. When you preach on the contribution, that Sunday will be the lowest contribution of the year. When you preach on attendance Sunday morning, that Sunday night will be the lowest number of the year. You've proven that wrong, and I appreciate that. I appreciate the encouragement of your presence. We continue this evening in our Footprints of Faith preaching series. And since we are doing the unified curriculum, I thought it would be good to talk about Joseph. Are you all familiar with Joseph? Have you heard of him? Yeah. So I thought it would be good to talk about Joseph, the favored son, because he is a very special character. Psalm 77:15, God, with your arm you've redeemed your people, the sons of Jacob and Joseph. Now, I know that's probably referring to the Judah. That's a mixture of Judah and Yoda. Judah of the southern kingdom and Ephraim, the son of Joseph, dominating the northern kingdom. But it's a special mention there. And Joseph has certainly a special place because of all the Bible characters, he's one of those that it's hard to find anything that he might have done wrong. Usually, the Bible goes out of its way to point out the oopses and of our heroes of faith, only Jesus being the perfect one. But Joseph and Jonathan and a couple others. There's not here. Daniel, I don't think. So a special character for sure. So we're going to talk about Joseph with regards to, or in the way that we always do. We're going to talk about who he was. We're going to talk about what he did. And then we're going to talk about what we can learn from him. So who was he? He was the son of Jacob, the chosen of God. And what do I mean by that? Well, turn in your Bibles to Genesis chapter 12 and verse 3. Genesis 3, we had that promise that God was going to send one that would crush the works of Satan underfoot. Thousands of years went by, and then that promise of the Redeemer that was going to come, the Messiah, was focused through the family of Abraham. And in Genesis 12 and verse 3, I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you. And note it, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. There's the promise to Abraham, the focusing of the seed promise to Abraham. Not just seed of woman, but now seed of Abraham. Turn over to Genesis 26, verses 2 through 5. Now, God speaking to Isaac, Abraham's son, then the Lord appeared to him and said, do not go down to Egypt. Live in the land of which I shall tell you. Dwell in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. For to you and your descendants I give all these lands, and I will perform the oath which I swore to Abraham your father. And I will make your descendants multiply as the stars of heaven. And here it is again. And in your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. So see, that promise was given to Abraham, and now it's been given to his son, Isaac. Turn to chapter 28, verses 13 through 15. Jacob sees the ladder. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and your descendants. Also your descendants shall be as the dust of the earth. You shall spread abroad to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. And in you and in your seed all the families of the earth shall be blessed. 3 times that was given. God says to Abraham, in your seed all the nations shall be blessed. His son Isaac, in your seed all the nations shall be blessed. And then in Jacob, Isaac's son, in your seed all the earth shall be blessed. It doesn't happen with Judah. It doesn't happen with one of his children. Did you ever wonder why? Why did God stop this? I believe it has to do with that Old Testament law that we see quoted often in the New Testament. It is by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses that what? Everything shall be established. Okay, well, what do we have? God says to Abraham, your seed. To his son Isaac, your seed. To Jacob, your seed. Established. Don't have to keep saying it. So, who was Joseph? He was the son of that man, the chosen of God, Jacob. Who else was he? He was the favored son of a favored wife. As we've talked about, lots wrong with that sentence, right? We've talked about the fact in our Sunday morning class that God speaks against polygamy in many different ways. There's direct statement about the one flesh principle and that the violation of that one flesh principle is adultery. And then there's the mention, the detailing of all the people that violate that pattern of God, of one man, one woman for life. And what does it show us every time? Strife and problems within the family, which is supposed to be a place of safety and comfort. Think of the mess of David's family because of polygamy. Think of the mess that we saw and we've already talked about with regards to Joseph. What did we have? We had Jacob, who desired to marry Rachel, the daughter of Laban, but Laban somehow tricked him into taking Leah. Remember Leah? Who he didn't want to have, but we talked about also that should Jacob have refused her? Should Jacob have stood on principle saying, well, I don't care that it's your tradition that the oldest daughter has to be given first. The deal was, I worked this long and I received the hand of your daughter Rachel. You have cheated me. Give me what I deserve. But he just kind of goes along with it. And we know before long he ends up with at least 4 wives that they're called. Zilpah and Bilhah also added. He's got multiple wives. He's got sons from each of them. And Joseph is the favored son. Why? Because Rachel was the one that he loved. And Rachel, you recall, couldn't have children for quite some time. Leah was having all these children, and that's why Rachel gave her handmaid to Jacob. We don't see much protest, and he has children with her. And then Leah gives her handmaiden. We don't see much protest, and he has children with her. But then, finally, we have Rachel gives birth to Joseph. So his favorite wife, the wife that he loved, the Bible actually says that. When God saw that Leah was not loved, he gave her children. But here's a child of the woman he loved. And he's getting a bit older at this time, and he's called the child of his old age. So he dotes upon Joseph, and that's who Joseph was. We know he had a brother afterwards, Benjamin, and I brought up the fact that, why wasn't Benjamin one of the favorites? And it might be with regards to the circumstances of Benjamin's birth, because you remember Benjamin's birth meant what? Meant the death of Rachel, his favorite wife. So, perhaps. Who was he? He was the favored son of a favored wife. Didn't make him popular amongst the rest of the brothers. What did he do? He did lots and lots of stuff, didn't he? He dreamed from God. You remember? He went to his brothers, who already hate him because he's the favored son. He's got that coat of many colors to make sure, in case you didn't see that Dad loves me more, take a look. You can't miss it. And he says, I had a dream last night, and here was the dream. Your sheaves all bowed down to my sheaves. So, not winning any points with those brothers, but the dream came from God. Then he had another dream, and he shared it with his father, and he saw that the sun and the moon and 11 stars bowed down to him. And even Jacob went and said, okay, I know you're my favorite, but come on. Your mother and I are going to bow down to you? He didn't say that, but that's the gist you get. But these dreams came from God. There's been discussion on whether maybe he was filled with arrogance. It's possible. Can't know his heart. He might have just been naive and not been able to, read the stitches on a curveball. But he mentioned that, and that was the situation. So what was the next thing that happened, or next thing that he did? Well, he was sold into slavery by his brothers. Picture yourself a 17-year-old lad. First, you've been thrown into a pit, and you think death awaits you. I don't know if he could hear what was being discussed above. That would be pretty terrifying. And then to have them sell you into, you get pulled up out of the hole, and you're like, okay, all right, joking's over, right? Enough of that. And then you see the Midianite traders, and you see your brothers making a deal, and you're bound, and you start being led away, and maybe even then you're going, okay, getting ready to cross that line between funny and not funny, and then you realize it's your life. That happened to him. And he traveled all the way down into Egypt. And there in Egypt, he was put on the block, and he was sold and purchased by Potiphar, one of the captains of Pharaoh. And what did he do? He did well. He served Potiphar well. And he rose in the esteem of Potiphar to the point where Potiphar put him in charge over his whole household of everything, reserved only his wife. Then what did he do? Then he got thrown in prison. Why? Because he was so faithful. Potiphar's wife desired him and asked that he lay with her. And he said, how could I do that? How could I do that to my God, and how could I do that to my master, Potiphar? And so because he was faithful and good and true, she lied about him. Sadly, Potiphar, there's debate whether he actually believed, and maybe that's why he just threw him in prison instead of, but he got thrown in prison, and there he's left. Then what happened? Well, then Joseph interpreted dreams by God, or with the help of God. You remember, he did well, which is kind of a weird thing to say, but he rose in the esteem of the jailer. And the jailer gave him things to take care of, because whatever things Joseph was given to take care of, it went well. There were two servants of Pharaoh that were in the prison, the baker and the butler, and they had dreams, and they mentioned the dreams. Joseph said, God is the one who can tell you what those dreams mean. Why don't you tell me what they were? And you remember the butler's dream was that there was a vine with 3 branches, and it had lots of grapes, and there was Pharaoh's cup, and he squeezed the grapes into the cup, and he gave it to Pharaoh. And Joseph interpreted it and says, that means in 3 days, Pharaoh is going to receive you back to himself, and you'll be back in your service. And then the baker says, oh, great, maybe you can tell me what my dream means. I had this dream of 3 baskets of various foods on my head, and as I was walking along, the birds were coming and eating from it. What does that mean? Well, in 3 days, your head's going to be removed. And they came to pass. And as the butler was being led out of the prison to go back, Joseph said, remember me. 2 years go by. 2 years? I doubt myself. That's a long time to wait in prison, again, for no fault of your own, because you were sold into slavery by your brothers, rejected and abandoned by your family, seemingly. You don't know that your father thinks that you're dead. And there you find yourself, and you've done good, and God has used you to interpret dreams, and your reward is in prison for 2 more years. Then the butler was in the house of Pharaoh, and Pharaoh had 2 dreams. And the butler remembered, and he said, "Oh my, I have not done well. There is a man in the prison, and he can interpret dreams." Pharaoh called Joseph to himself, and he told him the dreams. And Joseph interpreted the dreams. There were the 7 fat cows that were devoured by the 7 gaunt cows. There were the 7 plump grains that were devoured by the 7 stricken grains. And he said, God has made known to you that there's going to be 7 years of plenty, and then there's going to be 7 years of a terrible famine. My recommendation, Joseph said, was that you put someone who is wise and discerning in charge to set food aside during the 7 years of plenty, that you may be able to survive the 7 years of famine. And what was the result? Joseph was the man so selected, and he was made second in all of Egypt. And we say, yes, I know that. Stop. This young man, the son of Jacob, an Israelite, even though there's really not much of an Israel yet, in the land of Egypt as a slave, is now the second in charge of one of the most powerful empires in all the world. That's incredible. And we're not going to talk about this really later, but how many times has God done that through these pages? Think of Mordecai. Think of Daniel. Think of Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Men who were slaves or people in captivity who were raised to preeminence because of what? Because of their godliness and God being with them. God working through providence. So here, Joseph is in charge, and he's taking care of, making provision for the coming famine. And he had lost the family. Now what happens? He receives a family. He's given a wife by Pharaoh. And with her, he has sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. What happened then? Famine comes. His brothers come to him, and he tested them. Do you remember how he tested them? He was trying to see if they'd had a change of heart with regards to what they had done to him, and if they had had a change of heart with regards to the children of Rachel. He had them speaking through an interpreter to him, even though he could understand their speech perfectly. And because of that, he heard them condemn themselves for what they had done to him. And then with that whole situation of demanding that they bring back Benjamin the next time they came, having them come, and then there's Benjamin, and then he played that little game where he put the silver cup in Benjamin's bag so that Benjamin would get in trouble, and then Benjamin would have to be his slave, and gave the brothers the opportunity to, again, he understands everything they're saying. What are we going to do? We can't do this. We're paying for that sin, the sin of what we did to Joseph. We're paying for this, and what are we going to do? And Judah, his moment in the sun, stepped forward and said, take me, not the boy. Why? My father. If you do this, my father will die. Take me. And so Joseph tested his. I was thinking about this today when I was thinking about this. Did I say I was thinking about this when I was thinking about this? I guess that would follow. He tested his brothers, and you remember at the end, they're terrified, and they have thrown themselves completely at his feet. And he hasn't necessarily forgiven them yet, but what is he seeing when that happens? He's seeing the fulfillment of that dream way back home, of them bowing down to him. And maybe that's what's really helping him to see, this is it. this isn't you, brothers. And he forgave them. This was God working through you to get me here. Not that God caused them to send them into slavery, but that God could use their wickedness for the good of all. And so he forgave his brothers. What else did he do? He brought Israel to Egypt. And I used the name Israel there on purpose because he brought his daddy Jacob to Egypt. And he brought Israel, the nation, to Egypt because right now it's just a family. But in Egypt, this family of 70 souls can become a nation in just a few generations. He brought him down into Egypt. So they're going to have safety from the famine, safety from invaders and threats, and safety from the horrible influence of Canaan. Remember that Judah and Tamar incident that occurs, I was going to say in the middle, but it's not really in the middle, but the Bible starts the story of Joseph and then talks about Judah and Tamar and then goes back. And I've always seen it in it, the way that it flows is one of the reasons, the Bible telling us one of the reasons he had to get Israel out of Canaan because they were becoming influenced. So this was accomplished because of Joseph and what he did. He promised Israel. This starts to become pretty theologically significant. He brought Israel in for safety, but do you remember what his father did? His father called him to him, had him put his hand under his thigh, you know, that old thing of, there's my strength, swear by me. Do you remember what he asked Joseph to promise? When I die, don't keep me here. Take me home. Take me home to be buried with my fathers. What did Israel say? Take me back to the promised land. This is not where I want to end up. This is just where we are now. We're going back. Think of the promise in Genesis 15. This land is all yours and to your descendants. But not now. For a while they're going to go into a foreign land, and then they'll come back out. So Jacob makes Joseph promise, look back to the land. What happened? He was blessed with a double portion. The oldest son would receive two things, two blessings. The first would be the blessing of authority of the tribe, of the family. And the second, he would receive a double portion of the inheritance. With Jacob's children, it got really strange because of, again, polygamy. We have all these opportunities, but Reuben, who was the firstborn, lost his blessing of the firstborn because he lay with Bilhah, one of Jacob's wives. Simeon and Levi lost they're the next two in order, lost their right, if you will, to the firstborn because of the horrific thing they did in Shechem. You remember their sister had been abused and raped by Shechem, one of the people there that dwelt, but they wanted to join one another, and he basically said, I'm sorry I did what I did, but I love her. Let us be married. Let us join together and become one people. And Simeon and Levi went to them and said, what you've said is a good thing, but our God commands that we be circumcised. So what we need you guys to do is all the men in your city must circumcise themselves. Then we can become one people and one tribe. And when the men did that, when they were recovering from that, Simeon and Levi attacked and killed all the men because they couldn't really fight back very well. Horrific. So for that reason, they were not allowed the authority or the double portion. So the authority came to Judah. Turn to chapter 49 of Genesis, please. It is the blessing of all the sons of Jacob. Look at verse 4, talking about Reuben. Unstable as water, you shall not excel, because you went up to your father's bed. Then you defiled it. He went up to my couch. Look what it says in verse 5. Simeon and Levi are brothers. Instruments of cruelty are in their dwelling place. Verse 7. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. But look at 8. Judah is the next oldest, the fourth. You are he whom your brothers shall praise. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's children shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He bows down, he lies down as a lion, and as a lion, who shall rouse him? Here it is. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh comes. And to him shall be the obedience of the people. So the authority of the tribe is given to Judah. And in a sense there, that word Shiloh, literally to him to whom it belongs, is that promise continued. It's going to be through Judah's line that the Christ will come. Well, where's this double portion you're talking about? Well, turn back to chapter 48 and literally the last verse in chapter 48. Moreover, I have given to you one portion above your brothers, which I took from the hand of the Amorite with my sword and my bow. So you see, the firstborn normally got the authority and the double portion, but with Jacob's children, Judah got the authority, but Joseph got the double portion. How did that work out? Have you ever been confused when looking at the list of tribes later in the Old Testament? Sometimes there are differences. Because you're looking for Joseph when you talk about certain things, land, and you don't see Joseph. What do you see instead? Manasseh and Ephraim. So Jacob, each child got one tribe and portion of land. Yet Joseph didn't get one, he got two for his two sons. There's the double portion. How does it still work out with 12? Levi, you recall, got no land. Their portion was service of the Lord. Finally, and maybe most significantly on what he did, Joseph died preaching of God. Turn to chapter 50 and verse 24. Joseph's on his deathbed. And Joseph said to his brethren, I am dying. Underline it, brethren. But God will surely visit you and bring you out of this land to the land of which he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. See the 3 times? Everything's confirmed. Then Joseph took an oath from the children of Israel, saying, underline it, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here. And then he died, being 110 years old, and they embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. With his dying breath, Joseph said, remember the promise. Just like my father made me promise, take me home. God is going to visit us. This is not where we're dwelling forever. We're not Egyptians. We have been promised an inheritance in Canaan. Take me there, because note the words, God will surely visit you. Turn over to Exodus chapter 3. God speaking to Moses many, many years later. Look at verse 16. He's told Moses, I want you to go back and bring my people home. And Moses says, who am I? Why would they listen to me? What should I tell them? Verse 16. Go and gather the elders of Israel together and say to them, the Lord God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, of Isaac, of Jacob, see the 3 confirming everything, appeared to me saying, what did God say? I have surely visited you and seen what is done to you in Egypt. And he goes on to say some other things. What was the last words of Joseph? God will surely visit you. What are the first things that God says to tell Moses to tell the people in Egypt? I have surely visited you. It's now the time. This is that. That focusing on his last breath, saying, remember what it's all about. God is going to come and take us home. Don't forget. I think that was his greatest hour. So what can we learn? We've spent how many weeks already talking about it? We have 2 more weeks to talk about it. There's so much to learn, but just 3 things, because I'm a preacher, just 3 things. The first, Joseph teaches us that our faithfulness to God results or produces faithfulness to man. And it's interesting how that's kind of related to Matthew chapter 22, verses 36 through 40. What's the great commandment? Love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the other one that's like it is love your neighbor as yourself. When we are faithful to God, as Joseph was faithful to God, how did Potiphar find him? Faithful in all things. How did the jailer find him? Faithful in all things. How did Pharaoh find him? Faithful in all things. How did his brothers find him? Remember? Okay, he's forgiven us. And then do you remember what happened when Jacob died? The brothers got together and said, uh-oh, Daddy's not here now. Are we going to get it now? No, he says, of course not. I mean you no ill. I mean you well and your children. Faithfulness to God produces faithfulness to others. Christians are the best employees to have for anyone because we work as for the Lord, not just for men. Christians are the best citizens to have in your nation because we are obedient and faithful to the laws, because we are always seeking what is good. Faithfulness to God makes faithfulness to others. And it's the other kind of a negative way too. Our faithfulness to God means we're going to get in each other's business to try to get us to heaven. And that's faithful. We may not like it at the time, but some brother pulls you out of a pit of sin and helps you to get back into the light. Amen. That was faithful. What else can we learn? Our light should be seen by the whole world. Joseph was clearly seen. Everyone around him could see this man's from God. Jacob, his good works were seen by Laban, on and on. Daniel was seen. All God's people can be seen by that light that they shine, because it's a line of godliness and good that it's hard to, as 1 Peter 3:15 says, who will be against you if you do good? Well, there might be some, and even then you get to shine your light in the way that you react. Not with fear and terror and negation, but with hope. So let that shine to all people. We ought to do that. The way we live our lives, the way we use our words, the way we conduct ourselves ought to shine God's light. And so that they see there's something different. There's something good there. I've shared this story before, and I'll share it again, I'm sure many times. Long before I was a Christian, my father and stepmother became members of the Lord's church. And they were raising their children in the Lord's church. And I saw their family, and I saw that it was radically different than my family. I saw that they genuinely liked being together and hanging out together. They'd go on vacations together. They're always staying together and playing games together. And I liked it. And I wanted to be around it because that's special. Instead of what so many people in the world have is, I can't wait to graduate because then I'm gone. I saw something different there, and it was that light. Finally, circumstances don't define us. Our relationship to God does. Truth. Doesn't matter what situation you find yourself, rich or poor, healthy or sick, successful or not. What matters is, what's your relationship be judged? How was Joseph judged when he was in prison, when he was a slave? Just a slave, just a prisoner. Look what he became. Look who he really was. He was God's instrument of divine providence to bless not only Israel, but the whole world through Christ who would come through Israel. In Isaiah 53, What did Jesus appear to be to the world? Appears to be cursed of God. He's despised by men. Who was he? Lord and Christ. Circumstances, aren't it? 1 Corinthians 4, 1 through 4. I love Paul when he gets his Irish up. I don't think he was Irish, but I love when Paul gets his Irish up. And he says, I don't really care if you guys judge me, really. You understand that, don't you? I don't care. I don't even really judge myself. I don't care about my own judgment. There's only one judgment I care about. What does God think of me? That's what matters. Understand, brethren, our circumstances do not define us. Our relationship to God does. Who was the rich man or Lazarus the beggar at his gate? I'll be Lazarus any day. Amen? Therefore, Joseph is such a good example of Galatians 2 and 20, of living your life faithful to God. What happens when you do that? You will be blessed. Every time. So make your choice. If you're not a Christian this morning, it's evening now. You should wake up so you don't think this is morning. If you're not a Christian this evening, why not now? Why not put off your sin? Begin your life in the light. You can't be His servant in sin. Christians, don't get distracted. Don't be fooled. God is not mocked. All those admonitions. If you're not right, make yourself right. If we can help, come forward as together we stand and sing.